I'd like you to make sure that whether you're sitting or whether you're lying down now, that you make yourself as utterly comfortable as you possibly can. Please make sure that you don't have any external distractions for the period of this visualization, so that you can immerse yourself completely in this experience. I'd like you first of all to begin to focus very clearly on the sounds that you hear all around you now, and in particular the sounds furthest away from you. Every single sound is simply a wave, and every single wave of sound is your ally now, your helper, serving to soothe you and to enable you to focus more and more clearly on the deepening of the process of your own inner relaxation and the shedding of all those old weights and stresses, all those old patterns and habits which have held you back in the past. So now, as the sounds are always there, gentle waves, your allies and your helpers, always there in the background. The sounds and the waves are soothing to you now, and every single cell of your body can begin to soften now, and to yield to this wonderful wave of soft, gentle peace and healing. Now, in your mind's eye, I would like you to begin to focus on the following. I'd like you to imagine that you are now standing at the foot of a mighty tree, and as you look towards this tree, looking upwards toward the canopy of the tree, you notice that right at the very top of this tree there is a nest, and that nest is a very special nest. That nest is in fact your nest, and it's been designed especially for you. It's so very comfortable up in that nest, so much so that you find that you naturally, gently and effortlessly can begin to float softly and calmly up towards the top of the tree and closer towards your nest. And this nest has been designed especially for you, to your precise specifications. It's a wonderful place, which is absolutely soothing to you. So now I'd like you to gently land in your nest now, and acclimatize yourself to the feeling. Settle yourself down in your nest now, and make yourself utterly comfortable here, in this safe place, right up at the top of the tree. So now, I'd like you to glance over the edge of the nest and down towards the ground at the base of the tree. And on the ground, you realize now that everything you are about to perceive, you can view from this new higher perspective, looking down at the scene from above. A little bit like being in a theatre and observing the stage, a little bit below you. So you have a wonderful view of everything, a higher view, a clearer view. And as such, now I'd like you in your mind's eye to evoke an image of the old suffering self, the you who you have been in the past. Maybe full of struggles, maybe full of self-doubt. And I would like you to evoke a very strong image of the old suffering self, the you who you are now very much fed up with experiencing any longer. And I would like you now to create that image of the old suffering self vividly on the stage at the base of your tree now. See very clearly a life-size version in your imagination of the you who you are fed up with experiencing any longer. And as you conjure this image of the old suffering self at the base of the tree, now we're going to freeze that image like a life-size statue of the old you frozen in that moment back then. And you're looking over the edge of your nest now, down towards the stage at the base of your tree. And you're now observing the life-size statue of the old you frozen in that moment. The old suffering self as a life-size statue. So now, in order to get a clearer perspective, I'd like you to begin to float up and out of your nest now, and gradually down towards the statue of the old suffering self. Now you find yourself floating in front of the statue. I'd like you to pay careful attention to the facial expression on that statue, noticing the eyes, the tensions in the jaw or the brow. Notice the tensions in the body of the statue, the tightness in the shoulders or the hands or the stomach or the back or the feet. Now beginning to float around in a clockwise direction, slowly and gently, looking up and down at the statue and getting the measure of that statue, noticing all the little details, until eventually you arrive back at the front of the statue now, looking straight towards the face of the statue, of the old suffering self. And now that you have the measure of that statue, I'd like you to begin to float back softly, gently, naturally, and effortlessly, back up to your nest now. And you find yourself now settling back down into your nest, and quite casually, as you relax into the comfort and the safety of your nest now, you can glance over the edge, observing the stage at the base of your tree, with the life-size statue of the old suffering self upon it. Now, as you look at that statue, observing it, looking down at it from above, I'd like you to consider the following question. If that statue could contain a liquid, it would contain a significant quantity of liquid, would it not? So therefore, we're going to label that liquid suffering. So as you are now looking down at that statue of the old suffering self, which is full of liquid suffering, I'd like you once again to float gently, softly, naturally and effortlessly up and out of your nest and back down, slowly towards the statue. Now floating in front of the statue. Into your right hand I'm passing you now a little hammer, and in your left hand a little chisel. Now float a little closer towards the statue, and I'd like you to reach down towards the feet of that statue. and make a little marker point in your mind's eye by the very edge of one of those feet, just where the foot touches the ground. Now, when you've made that little marker point on the edge of the foot, place the tip of the chisel on that point with the handle of the chisel held high. Now, bringing the hammer down to bear upon the handle of the chisel, taking a little chip out of the foot. Now, float a little way back, and thank you, I'm removing that hammer and chisel from your hands now. And now you can begin to float gently and softly, calmly and confidently back up to your nest and settle yourself down in your comfortable nest now. And as you glance over the edge of your nest, you can begin to notice that the liquid is pouring out of the little chip in the foot. It's pouring out of the little chip in the foot all over the ground by the feet of that statue now. And the liquid is draining out of the scalp of that statue now. Effortlessly and freely. The liquid is draining out of the forehead of the statue now. It's draining out of those old temples now, and out of those old eyes now. The liquid is draining out of that old skull, and out of those old ears now. The liquid is draining out of those old inner ears now. That liquid suffering is draining out of that old nose and cheeks and jaw hinges. And it's draining out of that old mouth now. The liquid is draining out of that old chin and neck now. And out of the spine of the neck, the sides of the neck, and that old throat now. Until now, everything above the shoulders is no longer three-dimensional, but now is simply two-dimensional, like chalk drawing on a blackboard of the head of the old you, frozen in that moment back then. Now the liquid continues to drain out of the little chip in the foot, and it's draining out of those old shoulders now. It's draining out of those old upper arms, and elbows and forearms, and wrists and hands and fingers and thumbs and palms now. The liquid is draining out of those old shoulder blades and collarbones now. It's draining out of that old spine, the sides of that old body. Draining away out of that old chest and solar plexus now. The liquid continues to drain out of that old stomach. And it's draining out of that old sacrum now. Effortlessly and freely and continuously. The liquid is draining out of that old tailbone now, until everything above the tailbone is simply two-dimensional, like chalk drawing on a blackboard of the old you frozen in that moment back then. But the liquid is now draining out of those old hips, and it continues to drain out of those old thighs now, and out of those old knees now. It's draining away out of those old shin bones and calf muscles now. That liquid suffering is draining out of those old ankles and heels and the body of those old feet, and out of the soles of those old feet now. And the liquid is now draining out of those old toes now, all the way to the very tips of those toes, until there are only 3 drips left, and those last 3 drips simply drip away. The statue is empty of that liquid now, and every aspect of that image of the old suffering self is simply two-dimensional, like chalk drawing on a blackboard of the old you frozen in that moment back then. So you are now looking down from your nest at a blackboard with a chalk drawing upon it, of the old you frozen in that moment back then. So now, once again, I would like you, for the third time, and 3 is the charm, to float up and out of your nest, gently, softly, confidently and calmly, down towards the chalk drawing upon the blackboard. Floating in front of the blackboard now, looking up and down at the chalk drawing. Now into your right hand I'm passing you a damp cloth, and you can feel the coolness of the damp cloth in your right hand. Now, looking up towards the top left-hand corner of the blackboard, and raising up your right hand now, holding this damp cloth. And as soon as the cloth touches the top left-hand corner of the blackboard, you begin to wipe across the very top of the blackboard from left across to right, and down a little and back across to the left, and down a little and back across to the right. Wiping the chalk from the blackboard now, cleaning the blackboard thoroughly with this damp cloth. And you're wiping away that old scalp and hair now, and you're wiping away that old brow and skull now, wiping away those old eyes, erasing the chalk from the blackboard, cleaning it thoroughly with this damp cloth now, wiping away those old temples and cheekbones and nose and ears and inner ears now, wiping away that old mouth and jaw and chin now, wiping away that old neck now, the spine of that neck, the sides of that old neck and that old throat now. And now, wiping away those old shoulders, freeing and releasing the new you, naturally and effortlessly, as you wipe away those old upper arms and elbows and forearms and wrists and hands and fingers and thumbs and palms, wiping away those old shoulder blades and collarbones and spine now, wiping away the sides of that old body and the chest of that old body, wiping away the solar plexus of that old body and the stomach of that old body, that old sacrum, and the tip of that old tailbone. Now wiping away those old hips, freeing and releasing the new you, gently and effortlessly, naturally and freely. Wiping away those old thighs now, wiping away those old knees, those old shin bones and calf muscles now, wiping away those old ankles now, and the heels of those old feet, and the body of those old feet, and the soles of those old feet, wiping away those old toes now, all the way to the tips of those old toes, until with one single swipe of this damp cloth from left across to right, wiping away the very tips of those old toes now. But we don't just want to stop here. We want to make absolutely certain that there are no traces of chalk left all the way to the bottom of the blackboard, making absolutely certain that you've cleaned thoroughly the bottom corners of the blackboard. Until now, you find that you can begin to float a little way back from the blackboard and observe how utterly and thoroughly clean the blackboard now is. Now, I'm removing that damp cloth from your right hand now. Thank you. And you can begin to take in and appreciate how thoroughly clean the blackboard now is. And what a wonderful thing it is to realize that you can begin to create the new you. What a wonderful creative opportunity this is from now onwards.